The rain began early that Sunday morning, heavy and relentless, pounding against rooftops and flooding the dusty streets of the city. Thunder rolled across the sky as if warning something unseen, something dark, was about to unfold. Despite the storm, people poured into the massive hall of Holy Ground Ministries, their faces filled with desperation, hope, and fear. The hall was enormous. Its high ceiling echoed with murmurs, prayers, and restless movement. Ushers struggled to control the swelling crowd as plastic chairs scraped the floor and latecomers squeezed into every available space. Outside, the rain continued to rage, but inside, a different kind of storm was building. Whispers moved through the congregation like a living thing. "She's coming today. I heard she revealed someone's secret last week. They say she sees everything. Nothing is hidden from her." All eyes kept drifting toward the altar, where a single ornate chair sat empty. That chair belonged to Prophetess Patricia, the woman the nation had come to know as Mama Sidal. To her followers, Mama was more than a pastor. She was a mystery, a force. Some believed she could look into a person's eyes and see their past, present, and future all at once. Others claimed she spoke directly with God and received instructions no ordinary human could comprehend. Stories about her spread faster than truth itself, growing more terrifying and miraculous with every retelling. Yet that morning, there was something different in the air. The excitement felt sharper. The silence between whispers felt heavier. It was as if the hall itself was holding its breath. Among the thousands gathered sat Elizabeth, a young woman who had been attending the church quietly for months. She chose a seat near the back, as she always did, preferring to observe rather than be seen. Elizabeth was not the type to shout amen at every sentence or rush to the altar at the slightest call. She watched. She listened. Elizabeth did not leave the church immediately after the service ended. While others clustered around the altar, laughing, crying, and sharing testimonies of faith, she remained seated, frozen in thought. The echoes of celebration rang loudly in her ears, but inside her chest, a quiet storm was raging. She watched as people rushed forward to greet Mama Sidal, some kneeling before her, others stretching out their hands just to touch the hem of her robe. Patricia smiled warmly, placing gentle hands on bowed heads, whispering prayers that made grown men tremble and women weep openly. To everyone else, it was a holy scene. To Elizabeth, it felt rehearsed. As the crowd slowly thinned, Elizabeth stood and made her way toward the exit. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray and heavy, mirroring her thoughts. She stepped outside, inhaling deeply, as though fresh air could clear the unease tightening around her heart. For months, she had tried to silence the questions forming in her mind. She had told herself that doubt was dangerous, that questioning a prophet could invite spiritual consequences. After all, Mama Siatal's reputation was terrifying. People whispered stories of those who challenged her, how their businesses failed, how sickness followed them, how misfortune seemed to chase them relentlessly. Elizabeth had heard it all, and yet she could not forget what she had seen at the market. That memory replayed over and over in her mind. The same man, healthy and strong, laughing as he walked. No guilchur, no weakness, no miracle. Maybe I was mistaken, she whispered to herself as she walked home. Maybe it wasn't the same man. But deep down, she knew the truth. That night, Elizabeth could not sleep. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the so-called miracle replaying before her. She remembered Agatha's dramatic scream, the perfectly timed chaos, the sudden eruption of joy. It felt less like divine intervention and more like a performance. Long before the name Mama Sidal stirred fear and reverence across the nation, Patricia was simply a girl, ordinary, gentle, and full of light. She grew up in a modest home on the outskirts of a quiet town, raised by parents who feared God deeply and lived by simple principles: honesty, humility, and faith. Their house was small, but it was always filled with prayer. Every morning began with devotion, and every night ended with thanksgiving. Patricia was taught from a young age that serving God was the highest calling a person could have, and she took those teachings to heart. As a child, Patricia was known for her kindness. She helped elderly neighbors fetch water, shared her meals with less fortunate children, and spoke softly even when anger would have been justified. In church, she stood out, not because she demanded attention, but because her devotion was unmistakable. She joined a choir as soon as she was old enough, her voice pure and steady. When the pastor needed someone to teach Sunday school, Patricia volunteered without hesitation. She organized prayer meetings, fasted faithfully, and spent hours reading scripture when others were busy chasing distractions. The church loved her. Older women often said, "This girl has a special calling." Some even whispered, "She will be great in the house of God." Patricia believed it too. In her heart, she dreamed of serving God in a way that mattered. She wanted to touch lives, bring people closer to faith, and be used mightily. When she prayed, she didn't ask for wealth or fame, only purpose. But as the years passed, reality began to chip away at her innocence. After completing her basic education, Patricia felt a strong urge to start her own ministry. She believed God had placed a vision in her heart. With the support of her parents and a small group of church friends, she began holding prayer meetings in borrowed halls and open fields. That night at the conference, sleep refused to come to Patricia. She lay on the narrow hotel bed, staring at the ceiling as Pastor Benji's words echoed relentlessly in her mind. "You are sincere, but sincerity alone will never make you impactful. If you want influence, you must be willing to sacrifice." She turned from side to side, her heart heavy with confusion. Memories of her childhood flooded her thoughts. Her mother kneeling in prayer every dawn, her father's gentle voice reading scripture at night, the simple faith that had shaped her entire life. Everything she had been taught warned her that something about that conversation was deeply wrong. Yet another voice whispered louder, a voice fueled by years of rejection, empty halls, unanswered prayers, and silent offerings. What if this is the missing key? What if this is why nothing has worked? By morning, Patricia's spirit was restless. She attended the next session of the conference, but her attention drifted. The speakers talked about dominion, spiritual authority, and influence over multitudes. Each testimony of sudden success pierced her heart like a blade. During the lunch break, Pastor Benji found her again. "You didn't sleep," he said calmly, as if he could read her soul. Patricia forced a smile. "I was praying." He nodded knowingly. "Prayer is good, but prayer without action is limitation." He asked her to follow him. Reluctantly, Patricia walked behind him through a quiet corridor to a private room at the far end of the building. Inside, the atmosphere felt heavy, thick, almost suffocating. The curtains were drawn, and the lights were dim. "You want your ministry to grow," Pastor Benji said, closing the door behind them. "Not little growth. Massive growth." "Yes," Patricia admitted softly. "Then you must understand this truth," he continued. "Every level of power demands a price. Heaven responds to sacrifice." Her heart raced. He explained that there was a special ceremony. Patricia returned from the conference a changed woman. At first, the transformation was subtle, almost unnoticeable to those around her. Her sermons became sharper. Her voice carried a strange authority that silenced rooms effortlessly. When she prayed, people trembled. When she spoke, listeners leaned forward, hanging on to every word as if their lives depended on it. Within days, something extraordinary began to happen. People who had once ignored her calls suddenly started showing interest. Invitations to preach poured in from churches she had never heard of. A service that once attracted barely 20 people now struggled to contain hundreds. Chairs spilled out into hallways. Loudspeakers were set up outside for the overflow. Patricia told herself it was finally her season. Word spread quickly. They say she sees everything. She knows secrets without being told. Her prayers never fail. Testimonies flooded in. Some genuine, some exaggerated, many carefully guided. A woman claimed her long-standing sickness disappeared overnight. A businessman testified that his finances improved after one prayer session with Patricia. Each story added fuel to the growing fire of her reputation. Soon, people stopped calling her Pastor Patricia. They called her Mama See-It-All. The name stuck. Patricia embraced it, even though a small part of her flinched whenever she heard it. The title carried weight, authority, fear, reverence. And she learned quickly how powerful fear could be when wrapped in spirituality. Her ministry expanded rapidly. What started as small gatherings turned into massive weekly services. Donations increased. Offerings overflowed. New equipment was purchased. A larger worship center was secured. Money, once scarce, now flowed freely. Yet Patricia noticed something unsettling. Each time she stood behind the pulpit, she felt a presence guiding her words. Sometimes she knew things she had no logical way of knowing, arguments couples had the night before. To the world, Mama See-It-All was a woman favored by heaven. But when night fell and the city sank into silence, Patricia's true life began. After midnight, when prayers had ended, lights were switched off, and even her closest aides had retired, Patricia would rise quietly from her bed. There was no urgency in her movements, no fear. This ritual had become familiar, almost comforting. She wrapped herself in a dark cloak and stepped out of her luxurious mansion, walking barefoot across the cold ground toward the river behind her estate. The same river no one dared to approach at night. Locals whispered stories about it, how animals refused to drink from it after sunset, how strange lights sometimes flickered beneath its surface, how people who wandered too close claimed to hear voices calling their names. Patricia never hesitated. At the riverbank, she would pause, lift her face toward the sky, and begin chanting in a language older than memory. The words did not come from her mind. They rose from somewhere deep inside her, pulling power with them. As the chant intensified, her body responded. Her skin shimmered under the moonlight. Bones shifted with a sickening ease. Scales emerged slowly, glistening like wet stone. Her legs fused together, reshaping into a powerful serpentine tail. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the dark waters before her. In moments, the woman known to millions as Mama See-It-All was gone. What remained was something ancient, something feared. She slipped silently into the river, disappearing beneath the surface as if swallowed by the earth itself. Below the water lay another world. The marine kingdom was vast, an underwater realm of towering structures formed from coral and stone, illuminated by an eerie blue glow. Creatures moved through the depths with intelligence far beyond animals. This was not a place of chaos, but of strict order and ancient hierarchy. Patricia arrived not as a visitor, but as one bound by covenant. With the power of the marine kingdom flowing steadily through her, Mama See-It-All knew it was time to deepen her control. Fame alone was not enough. Miracles attracted people, but dependency kept them bound. During one Sunday service, after a long session of worship and emotional testimonies, Patricia raised her hand and called for silence. Her expression was solemn, her voice calm but commanding. "My children," she began, "the Lord has shown me that many of you are fighting battles you do not even understand. Spiritual wounds hidden deep within your souls." The congregation leaned forward. "There is a divine tool," she continued, "that God has instructed me to introduce, a gift for your spiritual growth." Her aides moved swiftly through the aisles, handing out small, carefully wrapped items. When the coverings were removed, each member found a mirror in their hands. Patricia called it the mirror of life. "This mirror," she declared, "is blessed by the Almighty Himself. Every morning, look into it, speak to it, pray through it, and God will reveal the broken parts of your spirit that need healing." The congregation received the mirrors with reverence. Some held them close to their chests. Others wept openly, convinced they had been given a sacred object. Elizabeth watched silently from the back. Something about the mirrors unsettled her. They were ordinary, too ordinary. And yet, Patricia's eyes gleamed with something unreadable as she spoke about them. Over the following weeks, the mirrors became central to church life. Members testified about strange dreams, vivid visions, and intense emotional experiences after using them. Patricia encouraged these testimonies, reinforcing the belief that the mirrors were working. In truth, the mirrors were far from holy. Each one had been consecrated, not in prayer, but in covenant. Through them, Patricia could peer into the lives of her followers, observing their fears, secrets, and vulnerabilities as clearly as Pag. The Sunday service began like every other: slow worship, rising emotions, and an atmosphere thick with expectation. Elizabeth sat quietly in her usual place at the back, her notebook hidden inside her bag, her eyes alert. She had learned to watch closely. Mama Seattle stepped onto the altar dressed in flowing white, her presence commanding instant silence. Her gaze swept across the congregation slowly, deliberately, as if she were scanning souls rather than faces. Then her eyes stopped. They fixed on a young man seated in the middle row. "Young man," Patricia said sharply, lifting her hand. "Stand up." The man hesitated, glancing around nervously before rising. He was tall, well-dressed, and looked out of place among the regular worshippers. Elizabeth noticed the woman beside him, his mother, clutching her handbag tightly. "What is your name?" Mama asked. "Abra," he replied softly. Patricia closed her eyes briefly, as though receiving a divine message. The congregation leaned forward, holding their breath. "My son," she said slowly, "the Lord is showing me something troubling." Silence fell. "I see your life battery running dangerously low." A ripple of unease passed through the hall. Elizabeth stiffened. She had heard this phrase before, always followed by fear, always ending in money. Abra swallowed hard. "Mama, what does that mean?" Patricia opened her eyes and looked at him with practiced sorrow. "It means that if nothing is done urgently, you will not live to see your 30s. Marriage, children, success, all will be cut short." Gasps filled the hall. Abra's mother cried out, clutching her chest. "Jesus!" Fear wrapped itself tightly around the room. Elizabeth's heart pounded, not with fear but anger. Patricia raised her hand again, as if calming the storm she had created. "But the Lord is merciful," she said. "He has provided a solution." Hope flickered across Abra's face. "There is a way," Patricia continued, "to renew your life batter." Elizabeth knew the moment had come when silence became heavier than fear. The notebook she kept hidden beneath her mattress was now thick with evidence: dates, names, amounts, testimonies, patterns. Every page told the same story. Fear sold as prophecy, hope exchanged for money, faith turned into chains. She was no longer guessing. She was certain. Elizabeth began cautiously. She didn't confront Mama Seattle directly. That would have been suicide, spiritually and socially. Instead, she spoke in whispers, one-on-one, to those she trusted. "Have you noticed," she asked quietly, "that every prophecy ends in an offering?" Some nodded uncomfortably. Others shut down immediately. "You're doubting a woman of God." They warned her. "Be careful." Fear protected Mama better than guards ever could. Still, a few listened. A widow confessed she had sold her wedding jewelry to buy miracle oil. A young man admitted he had dropped out of school after Mama declared his education spiritually dangerous. A couple revealed their marriage had collapsed after repeated prophecies turned them against each other. Elizabeth realized something chilling. The damage was already massive. She decided to take a risk. One evening, she posted anonymously in an online forum for former church members. She shared Abra's story, carefully, without names, along with others. She asked a simple question: "Has anyone experienced this?" The response was immediate. Dozens replied. Hundreds. Stories poured in from different cities, even different countries. Same patterns. Same language. Same fear-driven sacrifices. Elizabeth's hands trembled as she read. Mama Seattle wasn't just exploiting one congregation. She was running a system. But systems don't like exposure. The next Sunday, Mama's sermon shifted sharply. She preached about betrayal. "There are wolves among us," Patricia declared, pacing the altar. "People pretending to seek truth, but secretly working with the enemy." The truth did not explode. It spread, like fire beneath dry grass, unseen at first, then impossible to stop. Elizabeth released everything on a quiet Tuesday morning. Not with noise, not with drama, with facts. Videos of staged healings, audio recordings of threats disguised as prophecies, bank transfers tied to sacrificial seeds, testimonies from broken families, widows, students, and former aides who had finally found the courage to speak. Within hours, the internet reacted. By afternoon, the media arrived. By nightfall, Mama Siatal's name was everywhere. Shock gripped the nation. People who once shouted him in now sat frozen in disbelief, replaying clips they never imagined could be fake. The same crippled man healed in 3 different churches. The same divine revelation, spoken word for word to different people. The same miracle oil exposed as nothing more than salt and sugar. The illusion cracked. Inside her mansion, Patricia paced like a trapped animal. Fullness rang endlessly. Her aides disappeared. Some blocked her. Others switched off their lines completely. The same people who once bowed before her now ran from her shadow. Fear had changed sides. She attempted damage control. That evening, Patricia went live. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed panic. "These are attacks from the kingdom of darkness," she declared. "Anyone who believes these lies will face divine consequences." But something was different. The comments were no longer obedient. People questioned her, challenged her, mocked her. Someone posted a screenshot of her bank statement. Another shared a video of her midnight transformation, blurry but undeniable. Patricia abruptly ended the live stream. For the first time in years, she prayed. Not to God, to the Marine Queen. But silence answered her. In the church, chaos erupted. Members demanded refunds. Some cried openly. Others fought. Chairs were overturned. When the noise faded, the silence felt unfamiliar. The church building still stood, but it no longer breathed the same air. Where once fear echoed through the walls, now there was uncertainty, raw, exposed, and trembling. People came not to shout amen, but to sit quietly, unsure of what to believe anymore. Faith, for many, had been bruised. Elizabeth felt the weight of it every day. She received calls constantly, some from journalists, some from victims, some from people simply asking, "How do we trust again?" She had no perfect answers, only honesty. "The truth doesn't replace God," she told them. "It removes the lies that blocked him." Slowly, healing began. Former members started meeting, not for prophecy, not for miracles, but for conversations. They shared stories, cried together, and unpacked years of manipulation. Some admitted they felt foolish. Others felt angry. Many felt ashamed. Elizabeth reminded them gently. Deception works best on sincere people. You weren't weak. You were targeted. Those words freed many. But consequences still loomed. Investigations expanded. Financial records exposed a web of fraud stretching far beyond one ministry. Several pastors named in Patricia's underground meetings were questioned. Some denied everything. Others vanished quietly. The system was cracking. Yet Patricia herself remained missing. Rumors spread endlessly. Some claimed fishermen had seen a massive serpent disappear into deep waters on the night she vanished. Others believed she had assumed a new identity, preparing to rise again elsewhere. Elizabeth didn't chase rumors. She focused on people. One afternoon, Abra came to see her. He looked older, wiser. "I thought my life was ending," he said quietly. Turns out it was just beginning. He had gone back to school. His mother had joined a support group. They were rebuilding, slowly, honestly. Elizabeth smiled. Moments like that reminded her why the fight mattered. Time passed, but the scars did not disappear overnight. Elizabeth learned that exposure was only the beginning. Healing required patience, something miracles had never taught the people. Many former church members still struggled with guilt, asking themselves how they could have believed so deeply, so blindly. Elizabeth reminded them again and again. Manipulation works best where sincerity lives. You trusted because you wanted God, not deception. Slowly, people began to separate God from the image of God that had been sold to them. That distinction changed everything. Elizabeth no longer lived in hiding. but she also did not live loudly. She rejected invitations to start a ministry, to lead a movement, to become the new voice. Every offer felt like a trap disguised as honor. "I am not replacing anyone," she told them. "I am reminding you to think." She spent her days visiting homes, counseling families, and sitting with people whose faith felt shattered beyond repair. Sometimes they prayed, sometimes they didn't, and Elizabeth never forced either. For the first time, spirituality felt human again. Yet darkness still whispered. One evening, an elderly woman named Ruth visited Elizabeth. She had been one of Mama Ciatal's most devoted followers. She knelt before Elizabeth, trembling. "I am afraid," Ruth confessed. "What if the curses are real? What if God is angry?" Elizabeth knelt beside her. "Fear is not God's language," she said gently. "Control uses fear. Love uses truth." Ruth wept, not from terror, but from release. Across the country, similar conversations were happening. Churches began re-examining their practices. Some shut down entirely. Others removed leaders and rebuilt from the ground up. The word discernment slowly replaced deliverance. People were learning to ask questions that terrified false prophets more than exposure ever could. One night, Elizabeth returned again to the river, not to spy, not to chase darkness,